Good morning, good morning. Can you hear me? Oh, lovely. It's lovely to see you all. I always sit here and then I realize there's people up there, and even though it shouldn't shock me the second time, it does again. So it's really nice to be here. And what a beautiful service. I don't know if you... Do you know when you go somewhere for a long time? Like some of you will have been at this church for quite a long time, I imagine, right? And I guess it's really easy to take for granted. But when you're a newcomer or a visitor, you get to walk into a place and experience your service. And two or three things that struck me, if you don't mind me sharing. Is that all right? One was just the incredible, beautiful noise that comes from this part of your church every Sunday morning. Like, what a gift that is, right? Just the babble and the chat and the energy, that is incredible. I, like many people, grew up in a church where kids didn't make that kind of noise, and we were poorer for it. So that is incredible. The second thing was just Tracy. I don't think she's in, but just what a huge thank you for bringing us such a fun and brilliant way to share a story. I'm gonna do as well, and just how lovely it was to see that. And then finally, just the moment before we moved into prayer. There was this moment where if you came here and you didn't realize, you could think you were waiting for the kids and the youth to leave. But actually what you were doing as a church was you were enjoying the moment of hearing those kids and teenagers make their way out and talking and meeting each other and saying hi and asking how they've been. And I wonder if for some of you this morning you're thinking, oh no, I was just waiting for them to go out. So I should probably have a word with that Irish fella afterwards. That's not what I was doing. Yeah, but I want to encourage you that those moments are precious. Like, those moments are just beautiful. And so, thanks. Thanks for letting me be here. It's good to be back. I told you a bit about myself last time, so I won't do it again, but my name's Matt. I live in Chelmsford. I grew up in Northern Ireland. I have a wife, Christina, and two children, 8 and 2. And for work, I work in the media. I was formerly a TV producer, and I now work in the podcasting industry. And I spend my days in London doing that. Since I last was here, I was working part-time. I've in the last 3 weeks started working full-time. And my goodness, if I look tired, it's not my 2-year-old's fault for a change. It's definitely me getting used to being back in London every day. But it is a real joy to be back with you here at the URC. It is absolutely lovely to be here. Lorna's already mentioned it, but last time I told you, she sold me a dud of a theme, right? She gave me a theme that I was not ready for in any way. And so this time when I text to say, well, what will the theme be? If I'm honest, I was expecting an easy one. I wanted an open goal this morning. And so I was a little bit surprised, because I didn't just get an open goal, I got free rein. Because I got a message back from Lorna that said, because this week falls between Easter Sunday and your new series, I could talk about anything I wanted. I can tell you guys don't know me very well. Anything I wanted. And I didn't know what I was going to talk about, but there was something about Lorna's text that really struck me. This idea that we were between Easter Sunday and what comes next. And it got me thinking about those days after Easter, because they're not like Christmas. And especially this year, I don't know if it was the same for you guys this year, but Easter and what comes next felt very short this year because of the way the holidays fell. My whole family were here, so we had everyone. My brother and his fiancée, my mum and dad flew over, my middle brother and his family live in Essex already, so we were all together, and that doesn't happen very often. We travelled to Old Trafford to watch my team beat Norwich, which is very rare for my team to beat anyone these days, but we managed to see it, an Easter miracle indeed. We went up there as a family, we got to see that and enjoy that together. We had incredible sunshine, we ate delicious food, and we made precious memories. And then Easter Monday night came, and they all left. My mum, my dad, my brother, his fiancée, they went to the airport and they were gone. And all of a sudden it was like, well, where's the school uniforms? Does he need a PE kit? Where's my laptop cable? Has anyone seen that? Did he have homework? Did you have Easter homework to do? And what about that laptop cable? Has anyone seen my laptop cable? The jump from Easter Monday to normal Tuesday felt like a leap this year for us. I don't know about anyone else. You see, at least with Christmas, you get like Boxing Day and some sales to look forward to. This year, we got a mountain of eggs and a missing laptop cable. It wasn't a lot of fun in our house. But you see, it got me back to that first Easter, and Tracy's already told the story that I want to speak about this morning. That story of those two followers of Jesus who find themselves in a stark after Easter that must have felt like a leap. So we're going to look at that story. It's found in Luke chapter 24, if you want to follow along. We're going to look at it a couple of verses at a time. We're going to start just at the start, which is verses 13 to 16, and we're going to tell some of that story. It might come on the screen. If it doesn't, don't worry. But if it does, that will follow along there too. Now, on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. Now, Tracy's quite brilliantly explained some of that story to us already this morning, but I want to tell you that there's a couple of trains of thought about what was going on in that moment. Because it's a strange moment if you think about it. If you've been a follower of Jesus for anything up to 3 years, or even if you've known who this guy was, the center of everything for the past few days, you would think you might recognize him. So why wouldn't they? Well, for some, they think it's a supernatural event. They'll tell you that they were somehow kept by God miraculously and supernaturally from recognizing Jesus in this moment. For others, it's because the risen Jesus might have taken on a different form to the one that they would have known. Maybe he just looked different. For others, it's more practical. Maybe he had a different outfit on. I don't think it was dark glasses and a baseball cap, but maybe he was wearing something different or looked different in that way. But there's one idea that really captured my imagination when I looked into it, and it's actually the one that Tracy brought to us earlier. Because you see, some people believe that the disciples couldn't see Jesus because they were looking down the whole time. The sadness that they felt, the way the events of the past few days had so deeply impacted them, they couldn't even look up. And I don't know about you, but after the last few years we've had, that rings particularly true for me. That after everything we've gone through, everything we've experienced as a nation and as a world, it felt like we couldn't look up. And then just when we thought, just when we hoped the end of the pandemic tunnel might be nearing, we see war in Ukraine and a cost of living crisis in this country sweep our nation, causing us once more to find ourselves surrounded by sadness and loss. And like those two followers on the road, I wonder if it's felt like that for us. If it's really, really honest this morning, it's sometimes felt like we can't even lift our eyes. And I wonder if, like them, you and I might be struggling to see Jesus in this after Easter. None of us are immune to being in that place. So this morning, whether it's something you've experienced in the past, or something we know could become our experience in the future, or something you are living through right now, I think this story from Luke offers us some really practical ways that we as followers of Jesus can follow their example. Because you see, at the end of this tale, they do see Jesus. And I don't think that's an accident. And if I'm really honest, I don't think it's a supernatural lifting or dropping of scales. I think it's something to do with how those followers positioned themselves that day in the midst of everything that they were going through. And I think there's a couple of things, 3 things actually, that we can take from this story if we're willing to look at it again this morning. 3 things which I think we can practically do to help us lift our eyes and see Jesus no matter what situation we find ourselves in. So shall we dive into it together? I wish Ben was back here. He was way more excited. He was great. If he was here, he'd have given me an almighty yeah at that point. Shall we try again? Shall we dive into that this morning? Yeah. There we go. We all need to be a bit more Ben this morning. So the first thing that they did was this. They stayed together, connected to each other. If we go back to the beginning of that story, those same verses, on that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. The followers of Jesus have gone through a horrendous few days. They've seen the one they thought was the Messiah taken, beaten, tried, and executed. And this was not just the loss of a person that mattered to them in the human sense, but also the loss of hope of who he represented and who they thought he might be. And yet here they are together. We're told they're talking and walking with each other about everything that has happened. In fact, Jesus picks it up himself at verse 17. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet mighty in word and deed before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it's now the 3rd day since these things took place." But we had hoped. This might be the saddest 4 words in the whole Bible. But we had hoped. This prophet, mighty in word and deed, the one they hoped would redeem Israel, is condemned to death and crucified. But we had hoped. Jesus has been taken. It's 3 days and there's no sign of him. But we had hoped. I wonder how many times we stand on a road and say, but we had hoped. But I had hoped. I had hoped the results might be different this time. I had hoped the doctor might tell me something else. I had hoped if we'd gone through the counseling, maybe they would have stayed. I had hoped that perhaps this was the interview I might get. But we had hoped. And yet our followers of Jesus in this story are still together. And I think there's something so profound in that realization, so simple in that realization. You see, for so many of us, when we find ourselves in a but we had hoped place, we can be tempted to isolate ourselves. And for those of us in Christian community, when we find ourselves feeling like all is lost, like we can't find or see Jesus, when faith seems distant, the temptation can be to step away from that community and try to go it alone. Perhaps worse, the temptation for Christian communities when we experience those struggling who have lost hope, who can't maybe bring themselves to see Jesus, is perhaps to leave them alone. And yet this whole story begins with the reminder that these followers of Jesus, despite all of it, are still connected to one another. They're still together. Friends, I want to be really clear. There are moments and seasons when the community we're a part of won't be able to help us. There will be times when we need to make a change, a painful step away from the wrong people, or maybe just the wrong people for that time. And times when those changes will need to be made, hard decisions taken. But above all of that and over all of that is the truth that we are made to be with others. And no matter how difficult it is or hopeless it appears, we are always better together. And because these followers of Jesus stayed together, they took one step closer to seeing Jesus. The second thing that they were is open. Now, we've already seen that they were asked what they were talking about, and they don't shy away or shirk the question. They tell this stranger everything that's happened over the last few days, and then they go further. We pick it up in verse 22. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him. I love this part of the passage. We find out that they're aware that some people are saying Jesus is alive, he's risen, he's not there, he's not in a tomb. But they've not seen it, and neither did any of the men that they were with. So, they're still not sure. And I love that they're saying this to Jesus. Like at the heart of this whole story, you have to remember that Jesus is right there. They're standing there telling him, well, Jesus, some women went to the tomb and they said you'd risen, but we can't believe that. And Jesus is going, yeah, A remarkable irony that these followers are right next to him. But in fact, throughout this whole episode, I am absolutely blown away by the fact that they stay so honest and open with Jesus. They don't minimize their feelings or hide their emotions. They don't squash their own experience down. They stay connected to their story, all it has entailed, their disappointment, their doubt, their sadness, and their hopelessness. And even in this moment, the fact that some people have said, and they're still not sure. I love it. They're so open with this stranger. They don't gloss over it. And he says, what are you talking about? And they go, oh, nothing, we're fine. It's been a rough few days, but don't worry about it, we're fine. We're fine. What are you talking about? They don't get lost in Christian cliches or sing a song about how everything will be all right in the end. Not that any of us have ever done that, I'm sure. They're open to everything that has happened to them and the way it has made them feel. And I think that's really powerful. Because I think for too long, people of faith, we haven't followed that example. We've put on a performance that everything is okay. And we've missed the chance to be open and honest with each other. We value the sort of testimonies with the right kind of happy ending, rather than allowing people to share their story right where they are in the midst. Right in the middle of their pain, of their doubt, their disappointment, and their sadness. We've allowed sadness and fear and doubt to become the enemies of our discipleship, rather than recognizing them as deeply felt, often needed emotions that make us the disciples we are. And these two, that's not even all they're open to, because look at Jesus' response, picking it up in verse 25. Then he says to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. And as Ben said earlier, he said, "Yay, I'll go in." Jesus says, "Oh, how foolish you are." And for me, I have to imagine he says that with a smile. I don't think he's scowling at the disciples. And I'll take that as my bias and preference, and not any sort of sense by which I'm interpreting the original language differently. But I'll take it that way, because I believe that Jesus looks at these two sad, heartbroken disciples, and with a smile of love in his face, he says, "Oh, how foolish you are, and slow of heart to believe all the prophets have declared." And the reason I think he was smiling when he said it, because he didn't stop with the telling off, he goes on to explain it. So I'll take my bias of the kind of Jesus I want, and I'll share it with you this morning. But I think in that moment, he was inviting them into the story, not telling them off for where they found themselves. You see, he meets those followers where they are. He hears their openness and honesty, and he reminds them of who they really are. By not hiding or covering up their emotions and feelings, these followers are confronted with the truth of all that they had been taught. But it's only by allowing them this space to be open and honest that this opportunity even comes along. Had the disciples met this stranger on the road and said, "We're fine, nothing to worry about," why would Jesus have needed to tell them the story again? It's only because they can be open and honest and vulnerable and real in this place that Jesus has the opportunity in that openness to remind them of who they are and who this Jesus is. And look at what they do. When they get near to where they're staying, they don't say, "Well, I've had enough of that guy preaching at me." They say, "Will you come and eat with us? Will you come and share with us? Will you come and keep talking to us?" In the midst of their sadness and sorrow, the strangers come along and connected them to their story, and they don't push back or push away, but instead they lean in. They stay open, and they get one step closer to seeing Jesus. The final thing is this. They stayed fully present in the moment in which they were in. Let's pick up the story in verse 30. And I'm so grateful to Tracy for physically showing us what this would have looked like. Such an important moment in the tale. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. And I'm hoping they apologized to the women first. That's what I'm hoping they did. Sorry for not believing you. You won't believe what just happened to us. In the end, it's not wise words or a challenging question that opens their eyes, but the simple act of breaking the bread. You know, I've read this story a million times, and I don't think I've ever quite connected with how important that part is. A moment that could have been so easily overlooked. The simple, almost mundane act in the midst of a meal to break bread and share it around is the very thing that opens their eyes to whose presence they're in. And suddenly, everything makes sense. The way he spoke, the way they felt, the way he opened the scriptures to them. Suddenly, the simple memory of Jesus, of who he had been and what he'd done before, becomes the catalyst for Jesus to be seen right there and then. I think in those times when we find ourselves struggling to see Jesus, it's really easy to overlook the little things and to find ourselves not fully present in the moments in which Jesus wants to be seen and make himself known to us. How easy it is to be so caught up in our own circumstances that we miss the tiny, seemingly insignificant moments that want to open our eyes to his presence. How easy it is to find ourselves crying out for something big. "God, give me just a sign. I just want to see you. Give me something impressive. Break a door down, open a roof, shine a light, do something," when actually all we might need to do is choose to be present in the everyday, simple moments of life to see that Jesus is actually with us all along. It's too easy to rush past, squeeze in, look down, pack the diaries, make lists, find identity in how busy we are, and just miss Jesus walking alongside us the whole time. A few weeks ago, I was upstairs with my children, who are 8 and 2. My 2-year-old was in the bath. My daughter and my son, who's 8, was in his room reading. I think he was reading. I'm saying he was reading because it makes me sound like a great parent. He may have been playing his Nintendo. I might as well be honest with you. I don't know. I'm hoping he was reading. But he was in his room. And I was singing this song to my daughter. It's a very silly song from something we've been watching earlier in the day, and I'm singing it to her, and all of a sudden, around the bathroom door appears my son's head, and he starts singing the song in a silly voice, and I pretended to be shocked. I'd heard him tiptoe out, but I pretended to be shocked, and we all laughed and sang the song together. And then my daughter said, "Do it again, Dad, do it again." And so we started the song again, and I started singing the silly song, and a few minutes later I hear the tiptoe, and appears my son round the head, and he does the silly voice, and I pretend to be shocked, and we all sing the song. And she goes, "Do it again, Dad." 20 minutes later, we're on a loop. And somehow we're all finding it no less funny than the first time. We had stumbled into a moment of pure joy. My wife got home and I had work to do, so I said, "Oh, kids, I got to go downstairs." And they looked at me and they said, "But why, Dad?" And I realized that they were so present in that moment. They were so deeply present. I was half there because I was waiting to hear keys in the door because I had other things to do. And yet here they were, deeply present in this moment. That's why when our kids are listening to a Bible study and the question is, what did he say? They go, "Yay." Because they're not waiting for the story to end. They're in it. And maybe that's why Jesus said we might want to become more like children if we ever want to see the kingdom of God. Because you see, I want to be more like my children in that moment. Fully present in each moment. And for those followers on the first Easter in this story, by being fully present in the moment, they were able to notice this tiny detail of bread being broken. The reminder of what they had been through and who this Jesus had been suddenly opens their eyes and they can see Jesus. And maybe that's why I find myself drawn to the idea that this wasn't a supernatural event, but maybe a fully human one. Because disappointment and devastation and despair are something we all experience. And those things cause these followers of Jesus not to be able to look up and see him. But I also really believe their choices made the way. Choosing to be together, choosing to be open, and choosing to be present. They found themselves in the position to look up and see Jesus. And this morning, in this after Easter of 2022, I wonder if we might need to follow that example as well, doing all we can to make sure we don't miss the opportunity to see Jesus too. I think I mentioned it last time. My wife's not with me this morning, but her biggest criticism of anything I ever do in speaking is that she goes, "That's wonderful, Matt, but that's a theory. Can you tell me what I'm meant to do with that?" And I'm always like, no, I'll just stick to the theory, thanks. I'll leave that to others. But once again, she read my notes. And so she sent me with instructions that I have to give us some tips this morning, so you can be grateful to my wife for that. So let's look at it. What would it look like? What does it look like for us to try and live out those 3 words? I don't have everything here, but I do have some thoughts and some ideas that might be helpful, and I hope they're helpful for you this morning. So what would it look like to choose to be together? Well, for some of us, that might be a decision you have to make in your heart this morning. A decision to reconnect with the faith community we find ourselves in. Friends, I wonder if some of us are here physically, but we've checked out in every other way today. Maybe we've allowed ourselves to step back, step away, step out. And this morning, this story might be inviting us to find ourselves stepping back into our togetherness as a faith community. Or maybe this morning it might be a more practical and tangible step you need to take. Maybe there's a text you need to send right now. It's okay, I won't judge you for getting your phone out. Or it might be a few steps you need to take across this floor to reconnect with someone in this very room. Or a phone call later this week that reconnects you with someone and brings you back together in a way that you need to do. Because by practicing being together, I think we find ourselves one step closer to seeing Jesus. What might it look like to be open? Well, that might just look like being a bit honest with someone this week. A simple conversation where you choose to be intentionally honest with someone that you really trust. Or it might mean a deeper practice of maybe trying to find another answer than fine, thanks, when you're asked how you're doing. That's one that takes a bit of work. That one doesn't get overcome easily. We're all way too conditioned. We're We're in the British church. I mean, it's basically what we learn after Sunday school, right? How are you? I'm fine, thanks. How are you? It's like we learn it like we used to learn Bible verses when I went to Sunday school, right? We're fine, thanks. We're fine, thanks. It's a tough one for us Christians. We prefer that answer because it keeps us close to one another. But actually, by choosing to step beyond it, we find ourselves open with one another. Or perhaps it's an even deeper work that needs to be done. You might need some professional counseling to talk with someone that you can unload and open yourself with in a meaningful way, in a professional environment. Some tougher conversations that are required to take you from closed to open. But all of it with the goal of connecting us to ourselves and to our story. Because by practicing being open, I think we might just find ourselves one step closer to seeing Jesus. Or what would it look like to be present? Well, that might mean a simple shift in awareness. A simple shift that says next Sunday, when the kids go out and we wait for prayers to start, we choose to be present in that moment, enjoying the sound of children and young people that many churches in this land would, my goodness, they would give you your right arm for that noise on a Sunday morning. To choose to be present in those moments. Or maybe at home with loved ones this week. Maybe it's singing the song for 25 minutes and not rushing back to the desk to do some work with your kids. Maybe it's taking a little longer on that phone call with that relative that you check in with. Maybe it's enjoying that time spent with someone that sometimes you rush past. Or maybe it needs some practical help, like clearing some space in your diary, putting your phone in another room, turning off the TV, giving up multitasking. I know Lent has passed, but we could probably all do with giving up multitasking for Lent and the rest of the year, right? All things that will help you reconnect and be present in the moment, because by practicing being present, I think we might just find ourselves one step closer to seeing Jesus. In the very first after Easter, 2 followers of Jesus find themselves on a road. They're filled with sadness and they are empty on hope. And into this scene walks Jesus, but they can't see him. But by being connected with each other, connected to their story and connected to the moment, everything changed. By being together, by being open, by being present, everything shifted. And this morning, I think we can do the same. Choosing to be together, to recognize that no matter how hard it gets, we are made for community and never meant to be on our own. Choosing to be open, really honestly connecting with our story and one another. Maybe you've pretended for too long and the brave face and stiff upper lip just don't cut it anymore. Choosing to be present, really present in the moment, to be open-eyed to what's around, and to find yourself seeing Jesus present in so many places and people. What a glorious after Easter this could be if we made those choices. To be together, to be open, to be present, and to find ourselves face to face with the risen Jesus. Will you pray with me? Father God, we give you thanks because you don't love us in spite of our humanity. You love our humanity so much you chose it for yourself. And so, God, we come to you this morning as human beings with all our flaws and failings, all our disappointments and doubts, all our hopelessness, and the moments we find ourselves just feeling like all is lost. Lord, you don't turn your back on us in those moments. You walk closer beside us in those moments. And so, God, this morning I pray for every person in this room, myself included, God, that whether we can look back and see those moments where we failed to see you while you walked alongside us, or whether we want to help ourselves in the days to come when we might find ourselves in that place, or, Lord, whether right now we find ourselves struggling to see you in this world we live in. Lord, I pray that you would help us to choose, like those first disciples, to stay together with one another, to stay open to each other and to your story, and to stay present in the moment, and to realize that you have never left or forsaken us, but that you have been and will always be beside us every step of this walk of life we're on. So, Lord, between Easter Sunday and what's next, we give you thanks that the risen Jesus walks with us, and he talks with us, And he looks deep into our eyes and into our hearts and tells us that we are loved and cherished by the Almighty God. Father, hear our prayer, because we pray it through the name of your Son, who walked with us and still walks with us today. Amen.